And even after the breakup, we were still living together because we didn't know many people in the new city. So when a friend from school suggested we go on a weekend camping and fishing trip, I agreed. He grew up in a place called Flamborough, about an hour outside of Toronto. It's a really beautiful area with lots of green forest, farms, and small rivers. So we decided to camp and fish along a creek called Grindstone Creek. It's near some wetlands, and people say the fishing there is really good. We set up our camp in what was probably a farm field, trespassing next to a beautiful forest. The evening, fishing, chatting, and drinking. As it got darker, we made a small fire and roasted potatoes and hot dogs. So overall, it was a really nice night. We went to bed just after midnight, sharing a tent. My friend fell asleep before me, and I stayed up playing on my phone until about 1:30. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is waking up to a high-pitched yipping noise. Now I was a bit groggy, and it took me a moment to fully wake up. The yipping noise kept going and sounded like a strange coyote. I listened for a moment, then started playing on my phone again, as the sound was really annoying. I tried to ignore it, but it seemed to be getting closer. Eventually, it sounded like it was only about 10 feet from the tent. At this point, I was starting to feel a bit uneasy. I had seen coyotes in Calgary before, and always thought they were pretty harmless. They usually look about the size of a small dog, but as I lay there, I started to worry. Now what if this one was rabid, or smelled the food we had in the tent? My mind started racing, thinking about all the things that could go wrong. I have a pretty bad anxiety, so it's easy for me to get caught up in these kinds of thoughts. So I nudged my friend to see if he was awake, and he was. The strange noise had woken him up too. We talked about what to do about the coyote, since we hadn't brought anything to scare it away. Finally, my friend decided to shine the flashlight at it and shout loudly, hoping to scare it off. He unzipped the tent, and I watched as he pointed the flashlight into the darkness. I'll never forget what happened next. His legs suddenly went wobbly, and he stumbled backward into the tent. He had a shocked look on his face and kept mumbling. It's not a coyote. It's a person. It's some weird person. Now normally, I'd think he was just messing with me, but he looked genuinely terrified, and I never want to see that look on someone's face again. It was so shocked and scared that I knew he wasn't just kidding around. The weird yipping and howling noises kept going, and looking back, it really didn't sound like a coyote. I guess in our groggy state, our brains were trying to make sense of the strange sounds. My friend kept insisting I look out the tent flap to make sure he wasn't crazy. So I peered cautiously through the flap, trying to spot anything unusual in the darkness. At this point, I was having a full-blown anxiety attack. My heart was racing, and I felt terrible, but I had to look outside. I slowly peeked out the tent flap and waited for my eyes to adjust. That's when I saw him. He was standing only a few feet away from the tent, swaying a little, and wearing a baseball cap. What made it really creepy was that he was wearing women's cloths. That's when I realized something was really wrong with this guy. After I pulled my head back into the tent, my friend and I talked about
because you're always there for them. We're always here for you. Introducing the new Serta Eye Comfort. Experience 5 support zones designed for full body alignment with pressure relieving foams and cooling comfort. That zone comfort that always has your back. The new Serta Eye.
My friend and I talked about what to do. Finally, we decided to shout at him to leave. My friend started yelling, "Excuse me, can you leave? We're trying to sleep here." The noise stopped, and it was dead silent. Then we heard footsteps running towards our tent. They stopped right outside, but we didn't waste any time. We started shouting again. "Seriously, go away.
Go away!
Animals in here, and if you don't leave, we'll call the police."
Yeah.
Then, we heard him walk away from the tent, his footsteps fading as he headed towards the road. We stayed awake, terrified, listening to every little sound in the darkness, unable to sleep until the first light of morning. As soon as the sun started to rise, we hurried to pack up our gear. On the way home, we talked about what happened. It definitely wasn't very brave of either of us. We were both so embarrassed about how much a stranger freaked us out that we haven't talked about it since that day. Years ago, when my boyfriend and I were still new to dating, my sister suggested we try a snorkeling trip together. She told us about a quarry surrounded by a campground, filled with clear blue water. It's well known for its beautiful, crystal clear water, and is a popular spot for diving and snorkeling. So we thought it sounded like a fun adventure and decided to give it a try. Also, some people say there's a helicopter and a school bus underwater that you can dive down to see. My boyfriend and I decided to camp there for the night. At first, we had a great time.
Come play with the
We
puppy.
snorkeled in the shallow part of the quarry, and even though the water was a bit deep and strange, I was still having fun. The water is around 65 feet deep, so when we swam past the shallow area, it quickly dropped off into pitch-black depths. That's when I realized I have a strong fear of deep water. Besides the frightening darkness, there's something really creepy about the lake. It's completely still. Now it's a quarry. The water doesn't have any current, making it feel even more weird. Once we finished snorkeling, my boyfriend and I went back to our campsite to relax and unwind for the night. We were camping on a grassy spot down a hill from the road. Our tent was set up in a wooded area that extended from our campsite. Across the grass was another campsite that looked well used, but our neighbors were not there at the time. We were cooking hot dogs over the fire when our neighbors finally came back. It was already nighttime, and they went straight to sleep. My boyfriend and I were chatting around the campfire when we noticed a dark figure standing up the hill, watching us. The shadows from the fire made it hard to see details, but it was clear he was staring directly at us. He stood there for what felt like forever, just watching us. Eventually, he started walking down the road, moving slowly and disappearing behind the trees. We stayed completely silent, keeping our eyes on him as he walked away. The trees were connected to our campsite and also stood between us and him. I couldn't tell if he was still behind a tree or if he had disappeared. I was really freaked out, wondering where he went. I saw my boyfriend looking the same way, confused, but he shrugged it off, and I naively did too. We ended up forgetting about the figure and decided to check out the quarry late at night. The stars reflecting on the water were amazing, and it was really peaceful, but the deep black water was still pretty terrifying. When we got back to our campsite, we crawled into our tent. As we relaxed, I started to feel uneasy, even though I was trying to brush it off. The feeling didn't go away, and I kept thinking about the creepy figure from earlier.
Please,
After
come
we sat in silence for a
play.
while, my boyfriend suddenly asked,
I want to
Do you feel like we're
play.
being watched?
I want to
Why would you say
play.
that? My
Come
boyfriend decided he wanted to
play.
get out of the tent, so we moved to stand by my
Come
car.
play.
I came up with a strange idea that being out in the open field, right in the
I'm
middle of the
looking for
campground, might be
you.
the safest place.
I'm
I
coming
thought that if
for
someone was coming towards us,
you.
we'd have a better chance of seeing them from there.
I'm coming
So we were
for
standing in the middle of the
you.
field when we saw a shadowy figure that looked similar to the one we'd seen earlier. He was about
Today
20 yards
I'm
away.
coming for
We both
you.
noticed him as we walked, and he started walking in the same direction as us. We changed our direction, and he did also. So we agreed that if we changed direction again and he followed us, we'd head straight back to my car.
Play.
We turned a different way, and just as we expected, he followed us again. So we didn't
Too
waste any
scared to
time
say
and ran back to the
anything.
car. From
Does the
inside the
cat
car,
got
I
your
watched him
tongue?
slowly walk back into the darkness, still staring at us. My boyfriend then said, "Let's get out of here." And I agreed. But all our camping gear
I
was still
cut it
outside.
off.
We quietly gathered our things, trying not to scare each other. The strangest part of the story comes next, in my opinion. Now my headlights weren't working, and there was a strange fog on the windshield that wouldn't go away, no matter what we tried. We had to drive out of the woods using only the low beams, and the fog made it really hard to see. We somehow managed to get out, but the fog disappeared right when we got to the gas station. We got home around 1 a.m. I told my dad the story the next day, and he said he was glad we got out of there, as things could have turned out really badly. My boyfriend and I think the shadowy figure we saw was either someone trying to harm us, or maybe a Wendigo. We've sort of decided it might have been a Wendigo, because what happened was so hard to explain. I want to share
Next
something that happened to my
story.
girlfriend and me about 2 years ago, when we were in our late 20s. We decided to go camping for the weekend, and we chose the Stanislaus National Forest near Big Trees,
Don't
California.
leave.
The place was beautiful, with tall trees all
Come
around. We were
back.
excited to spend the night under the stars. But even now, when I think about that night, it still gives me chills and makes my heart race. We were only about 15 minutes away from the main road, but it felt really isolated. There were just dirt roads and trees all around us. We got there in the early afternoon and set up our camp in a nice open area on top of a hill next to the road. During the few hours between when we arrived and when it got dark, we saw only about 4 cars go by. They were all hunters leaving the forest. By 7, the sun was mostly down, and it was getting dark. The quiet and calm of the woods was nice, but it felt a bit strange being so isolated. I've been camping maybe 50 times before, but I've always been with a larger group, or at a designated campsite. After we finished dinner, which we cooked over the campfire, we hung our food in a bear bag to keep it safe from animals. Then, once it was completely dark, we relaxed on a blanket and gazed up at the stars. The night sky was clear, and we could see countless stars twinkling above us. I was feeling good and had almost forgotten that we were alone in the middle of the forest. So we went into the tent and sat in the dark, talking for at least an hour. I'm a tall guy, but tent is high enough that I can sit up inside it easily. The
What's
rainfly was
up?
just lying on top of the tent. It covered one side completely, but it wasn't
Let's
attached or
go
staked
down.
We had a clear view through the mesh sides, and the trees outside were only faintly lit by the moon.
You going to
Things
play?
got creepy.
Listen.
I
Play,
had a lot of
play.
supernatural activity, and decided
Come.
to tell my girlfriend about a
Play.
ritual where you sit in a dark room at 3 a.m. set up a candle and 2 mirrors, and through some
Yes.
mix of unknown forces and being really tired, you might see images in the mirrors
Listen.
that seem to talk to you. I was having fun scaring her, and to be honest,
Don't be
I was scaring
scared.
myself a little too. Just thinking about it now gives me chills. The woods were completely
Cat
silent,
got your tongue.
and there wasn't even a hint of wind. There was no rustling or movement in the air at all. I paused my story, and while I did, the rainfly started to slowly pull back from the top of the tent. It didn't fall off or get blown away. Honestly, it felt like someone was carefully pulling it down from behind us. I'll never forget the sound it made. We turned and looked at each other, both wide-eyed, and my heart felt like it was in my throat. The rainfly kept sliding slowly down the tent until it was completely off. It was too dark to see anything clearly behind us, but my mind was racing with all the scary creatures I'd seen in horror movies. I'd like to say I sprang into action to make sure we were safe, but I was frozen in place. It was a terrifying feeling. We sat there
Don't
in
be
shock for
scared.
about 10 seconds,
Run away.
until I finally managed to grab my flashlight and check behind us. But there was nothing. We both let out a huge sigh
If you're not
and started
scared,
whispering
then chat.
excitedly. What the heck was that? Then I got out and looked all around the clearing. But after a while, I felt silly, and we decided to go to sleep. The next morning, we woke up early and packed up our camp. It was sunny and quiet, but I still couldn't shake the creepy feeling from the night
Welcome,
before.
welcome.
While I was on my knees rolling up the tent, I kept glancing around at the trees. My girlfriend was packing up breakfast about 30 feet in front of me. Again, there was absolutely nobody around. No
Where are
birds
you
chirping,
from?
no animals in sight. Then, from directly
I'd
behind
like to
me,
come see
I
you.
suddenly heard 2 quick, loud thuds. The sound was like an axe hitting a tree, and it happened about 2 seconds apart. I'd say it came from within 100 feet of where I was. My girlfriend jumped up as I quickly turned around to look, but there was nothing there. We both said, "Okay, time to get out of here," and left in a hurry. We safely reached our home, and only then did we start to feel a bit calmer.
Scary,
As we reflected on
scary.
everything that happened, we wondered if it could have all been just our imagination. Being in such an isolated place, with the dark woods surrounding us, it's possible our minds were playing tricks on us.
You wanna play? Let's chat.
I have an American bully, a dog who's afraid of almost everything, so I don't really see her as my protector.
If you're scared, run away.
Instead, I feel like I'm the one looking out for her, and I'm completely fine with that.
Run.
Now my boyfriend works late shifts, so when she hears the garage door open, she usually starts barking. Last
Not
night around
for
10:55,
kids.
she suddenly began barking loudly and running around the house. At first, I thought she was just being her usual self, so I told her to go back to bed. I then heard my doorbell ringing over and over, and someone was knocking too. We never use our front door. Not once have we ever come in through it. We always use the garage.
Where are you from?
My first thought was that my boyfriend's garage opener might be broken, but I didn't have any missed calls or texts from him.
Maybe I can come and play.
Now, we live in a gated community, so I usually feel very safe here. But when I went downstairs with my dog, I heard someone outside screaming, "Help me," while still knocking, and ringing the doorbell. We have one of those locks at the top of the door,
Talk,
like in hotels,
talk.
so you can open it just a little bit without fully opening the door. I unlocked the deadbolt and doorknob and opened the door a little. There was a man outside saying, "Help me."
If you
And
don't
then he
chat,
started
you are
yanking the doorknob.
scared.
I screamed, "What do you need help with?" But he wouldn't answer and just kept pulling on the knob. My dog was growling the angriest I've ever heard. I slammed the door shut with all my strength and
Dirty
locked it again.
cat.
I yelled that I was calling the police. While I was on the phone, he kept ringing the doorbell and pounding on the door. The man kept banging on the door
Made you
until the cops
jump.
arrived. When they got there, I saw them put an elderly man in the back of their car. I found out it was my neighbor from across the
That
street,
fool.
someone I've never met and barely seen.
I'll make
Apparently,
a
he has
fatality out
dementia
of you.
and had wandered out of his house. Now I feel really guilty for calling the police and scaring his wife. I also feel silly for how scared I was. I watch a lot of crime shows, and my boyfriend has a night shift job, so he usually isn't home until 4 a.m. That's why I thought someone was watching me and knew I was home alone. I'm worried that if it had been someone trying to hurt me, I made a mistake by opening the door a little, even though it was still locked. I keep telling myself I did the right thing, because what else could I have done? When all I knew was a strange man at my door acting weird and trying to get into my house.
A road trip without McDonald's? That's not a road trip. Just a really long drive.
Make your trip count with a $3.99 bundle or a $3 breakfast bundle.
Ba-da-ba-ba.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Dark Horror Diaries podcast. This happened to me when I was around 10 years old. I never really told anybody apart from my best friends. I grew up in Scotland on a farm with my dad. After I turned 6, my dad started to develop arthritis in old age. He couldn't look after the animals, so I had to help out until we could sell them. Feeding them act. I was a bit of a tomboy in some ways. I didn't mind bugs, dirt and mud, the dark act. I didn't get scared easily. I was the kid trying to scare people most of the time for fun. One day my dad left me in charge of our land, whilst he went to get his back checked since it had been getting worse. You're probably thinking he didn't care about me or anything, so before you judge, he has, and always will care about me. He said that I should stay inside and draw, do something creative. I was brought up speaking English. I never really understood why. Still don't, to be honest. So I couldn't really talk to any of the adults. Some of my friends spoke English. I just pretended to know what they meant if they did speak Scottish, since I had an accent. People believed me. I just sat inside all day and drew pictures and did puzzles. It started raining and thundering. I jumped out of my skin every time I heard thunder. A while after the rain started, I heard a cow wandering around. We had 5 cows, 10 pigs, and 3 sheep. I put on my raincoat and looked outside for her. The gate and the doors to the shed where they slept had blown open. I eventually tempted her back to the shed and calmed down the rest of the cows. There was one cow that was a bit smaller than the rest. She didn't have a name since she was so young, only born a few days ago. She normally stayed with the rest of the cows and stayed warm. I could see her huddled up in the corner, so I went to see if she was okay. The rest of the cows didn't even notice and care about her for some reason, so it was safer than normal to do so. When I was close enough to get a good look at her, I could tell something was wrong. Normally she would jump and run up to me and lick my hand like a pet cat or something. She just stayed still, huddled up and shivering. When I was sitting next to her, I put my hand on the back of her neck and patted her to reassure her that she was okay, and that the thunder couldn't hurt her. She bent her neck around and looked at me. She didn't blink and her eyes didn't move. She just stared at me. She jumped up, pushed me out the way, and ran out of the open door. The gate was locked, so I thought she would run back inside when she realized it was raining. I ran after her but couldn't see her. I walked around.
Mom and Dad can be a little competitive. They get all
Hello. How are you today? Hello. I can't hear you. What is your name? Let's chat a while. Hello, how are you? Have a nice day.